Are you ready to dive into the fascinating world of ultimate abilities? Have you ever imagined having the power to control the very laws of nature? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Prepare yourself for an epic journey through the universe of the most powerful abilities ever conceived. What would happen if you could bend reality to your will? This question isn't just rhetorical, my friends. In the universe we're about to explore, there are beings capable of doing exactly that.
We Juin of RE talking about ultimate abilities, or as they Juin of RE known in the original Japanese, ultimate skill.
But before we delve deeper into this fascinating topic, let's build some context. Imagine a world where special abilities are common, a place where people can manipulate fire, control water, or even read minds. Now, elevate that concept to the extreme. What would you have? Exactly, ultimate abilities. Ultimate abilities are the pinnacle of ability evolution. They represent supreme power, the capacity to directly interfere with the laws that govern our universe. It's as if the user becomes a small god within their specific domain. But how did these abilities come about? What is their origin? To understand this, we need to go back in time a bit and talk about unique abilities. Unique abilities are manifestations of a person's individuality. They reflect the essence of the being, their experiences, their traumas, their joys. Each unique ability is, as the name suggests, unique and non-transferable. They are powerful, no doubt, but they're still far from the maximum potential an ability can achieve. This is where ultimate abilities come in. When a unique ability is taken beyond its limits, when it transcends the barriers of the possible, it transforms into an ultimate ability. It's as if the unique ability were a caterpillar, and the ultimate ability were the butterfly resulting from an extraordinary metamorphosis. But don't think it's easy to awaken an ultimate ability. Oh no, far from it. To reach this level of power, much more than simply desiring it is necessary. It requires an unshakable will, a strong and resilient soul. Moreover, the user needs to be a form of spiritual life. This means that not all living beings are capable of awakening an ultimate ability. And here's a fascinating detail. Just like unique abilities, no ultimate ability is identical to another. Each one is a unique and powerful reflection of its user's essence. It's as if each ultimate ability were a living work of art, shaped by the personality and experiences of the one who possesses it. Now you must be wondering, but if these abilities are so powerful, how can anyone fight against them? Well, that's an excellent question. The truth is that combating an ultimate ability is not a task for just anyone. In fact, there are only a few ways to oppose this incredible power. 1. With another ultimate ability. 2. Using an administrative authority. 3. Through final level magic. 4. With divine level equipment. 5. Or being a deity. But, in the end, it all comes down to willpower. Even with all these options, facing an ultimate ability is a monumental challenge that few can overcome. An interesting characteristic of ultimate abilities is that they consume an enormous amount of energy to be awakened and maintained. It's as if the universe charged a high price for allowing someone to manipulate its fundamental laws. This energy is converted and channeled to manifest the power of the ability. But what if someone wanted to obtain an ultimate ability without having to go through the process of naturally awakening it? Well, that's possible, but it's not simple. There are certain methods to transmit ultimate abilities to those who haven't awakened them on their own. However, there's a fundamental requirement. The recipient needs to be a form of spiritual life. Without this characteristic, the transfer simply wouldn't work. Speaking of transfer, there are interesting variations of ultimate abilities based on how they are acquired.
We have ultimate gift, ultimate gift, and ultimate enchantments. Ultimate enchant, ultimate enchant.
Ultimate gifts are ultimate abilities granted through the soul corridor. Have you ever imagined receiving a gift so powerful that it could completely change your existence? Well, that's how ultimate gifts work. They are transmitted directly to the essence of the being, fundamentally altering who you are. On the other hand, ultimate enchantments are ultimate abilities given to those who are outside the soul corridor. It's as if someone painted a masterpiece directly on your soul, granting you powers beyond common understanding. Both of these variations are fascinating because they show that, even in the realm of supreme abilities, there are nuances and differences. It's not simply a matter of having or not having an ultimate ability, but also of how it was obtained and how it manifests. Now, let's talk a bit about how these abilities are referenced in the original story. It's interesting to note that characters usually refer to ultimate abilities using only the mythological being that gives them their name, without the elaborate titles we see in translations or wikis. For example, they would simply say Beelzebuth, not Beelzebuth, Lord of Gluttony. This is due to the nature of furigana and ruby characters in Japanese texts. This linguistic peculiarity adds an extra layer of depth and mystery to ultimate abilities, as if the mere act of pronouncing their names invoked their primordial power. And speaking of names, did you know that users of ultimate abilities have a special denomination?
They are called Ultimate Awakened, 究極覚醒者、開極覚醒者。
This title carries enormous weight, reflecting the elevated status and incomparable power of these individuals. A fascinating characteristic of ultimate abilities is that they cannot be stolen, at least not in the traditional sense. The only exception is when the user received the ultimate ability instead of awakening it on their own. It's as if the universe protected these abilities, ensuring that they remain with those who truly deserve them. However, the fact that they can't be stolen doesn't mean they can't be replicated or copied. There are certain abilities and techniques capable of doing exactly that. Abilities like Michael, Shub Nigurath, and True Hero have the power to replicate or copy ultimate abilities. It's as if these abilities were so powerful that they could even imitate the inimitable. A particularly interesting case is that of the mirrored copies made by Isis. These copies seem to be able to replicate the ultimate abilities of the original. An example of this is Emel's, who was created with the Beelzebub ability. However, it's curious to note that this copy didn't work with Raphael. This leads us to question: what makes some ultimate abilities copyable and others not? Is there some hidden hierarchy among these supreme abilities? These questions lead us to reflect on the fundamental nature of ultimate abilities. Are they truly the pinnacle of power, or is there something even beyond? And if there is, what could be more powerful than the ability to control the very laws of nature? As we explore the concept of ultimate abilities more deeply, more questions arise. For example, how do these abilities affect the balance of power in a world where they exist? What kind of society would form around individuals with such powers? And what would be the ethical implications of possessing an ability capable of altering reality itself? Imagine for a moment a world where ultimate abilities are more common. What would everyday life be like in such a place? We would probably see a society drastically different from ours. Perhaps there would be a hierarchy based on the power of abilities, or perhaps the very existence of such powers would lead to a delicate balance, with each powerful individual serving as a counterweight to the others. And what about technological development in such a world? Would the existence of ultimate abilities accelerate scientific progress, allowing manipulations of reality that our current science can only dream of? Or, on the contrary, would the dependence on these supernatural powers slow down technological advancement, making it less necessary? There's also the question of responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, as the saying goes. How would users of ultimate abilities deal with the weight of their powers? Would there be laws or codes of conduct to regulate the use of these abilities? And who would have the authority to enforce these rules when the offenders possess the power to bend reality? Another fascinating aspect to consider is how ultimate abilities would affect the psychology of their users. Having the power to control the laws of nature would certainly change a person's perspective on the world and their place in it. Could this lead to a sense of detachment from normal reality, or perhaps a deep sense of responsibility for the world around them? And what about those who don't possess ultimate abilities? What would it be like to live in a world where some individuals have such vast powers? Could this lead to feelings of inferiority, envy, or resentment? Or perhaps it would inspire people to strive harder, in the hope of one day awakening their own ultimate ability. As we reflect on these questions, we begin to understand why ultimate abilities are such a fascinating and rich concept. They are not just a powerful narrative tool, but also a means of exploring deep questions about power, responsibility, free will, and the nature of reality. But let's return for a moment to the mechanics of ultimate abilities. An intriguing question is, what happens when two ultimate abilities come into direct conflict? Would it be like an irresistible force meeting an immovable object? Or would there be some kind of hidden hierarchy among the abilities, determining which one would prevail? And what about the evolution of ultimate abilities? If they are the final stage of ability evolution, does this mean they are static, unchangeable? Or could it be that, like their users, they can also grow and develop over time and with experience? Another interesting aspect to consider is the relationship between ultimate abilities and the concept of fate or predestination. If someone is born with the potential to awaken a specific ultimate ability, does this mean their destiny is somehow already mapped out? Or does free will still play a crucial role, even in the realm of supreme powers? And what about the impact of ultimate abilities on the culture and mythology of a world where they exist? Surely, users of these abilities would be seen as legendary figures, perhaps even worshipped as gods by some cultures. How would this shape the religious and philosophical beliefs of that world? Speaking of gods, it's fascinating to note that one of the ways to combat an ultimate ability is through divinity. This implies that, as powerful as ultimate abilities are, there are still forces beyond them. What does this tell us about the hierarchy of power in this universe? And what exactly constitutes a divinity in this context? Another intriguing question is the relationship between ultimate abilities and the concept of identity. If an ultimate ability is such a profound reflection of a person's essence, what happens to someone's identity when they receive an ultimate ability through transfer, instead of awakening it naturally? Do they become a different person? Or does the ability somehow adapt to its new essence? And what about the process of awakening an ultimate ability? We know it requires a strong will and a resilient soul, but how exactly does this manifest? Would it be a moment of sudden epiphany, or a gradual process of discovery and acceptance of one's own power? As we explore these questions, we begin to see that ultimate abilities are much more than just fantastic powers. They are a prism through which we can examine fundamental questions about the nature of reality, the meaning of power, and the limits of human potential. But perhaps the most intriguing question of all is, what comes after ultimate abilities? If they represent the pinnacle of individual power, is there anything beyond? Or is the real challenge not to acquire more power, but to learn to use wisely the power we already have? These are just some of the many questions that arise when we delve into the fascinating world of ultimate abilities. Each answer seems to generate a dozen new questions, creating an intellectual labyrinth as vast and complex as the powers we are exploring. And so, we come to the end of our journey through the nature of ultimate abilities. We've explored their origin, their characteristics, their variations and implications. We've reflected on questions of power, responsibility, and the very nature of reality. But, as always happens with the great mysteries of the universe, we end up with more questions than answers. And perhaps that's how it should be. After all, true power lies not in the answers we find, but in the questions we ask. And so, dear viewer, I leave you with one last question to ponder. If you could awaken an ultimate ability, what would it be? And more importantly, what would you do with that power? The answer, as always, is in your hands. Until next time, and don't forget to keep exploring the mysteries of the universe.